We would like to start talking about digital space because during the pre and post-COVID, the digital space has entered into our daily life. And as we have understood, you have also used this space to create the work that is going to be performed or don't know how in Bassano. So can you tell us about this digital space and your relation with it?
Yes, I have jumped in head first to this, you know, I mean, I think we're all being forced to deal with the digital space. For example, this conversation, you know, we wouldn't be having this conversation if we didn't have access to all these digital platforms. At first, it was mostly just conversations that were being had between institutions or different festivals and artists regarding the cancellation of many tours. So, you know, so there were many conversations that were happening around that, and then it quickly became clear that we were not returning to tour soon. And so others started to think about how we could actually rehearse via these digital platforms, or how we could actually create work only for digital platform. So these are two things that I've also done. One is rehearsing through Zoom with the dancers who are all in Italy, in Bassano del Grappa, but they will be able to perform the work live in the social distancing kind of space in the park outside. And the other thing that I've done is to create a digital piece. There's almost a half an hour for the National Arts Festival in Makanda, South Africa, the former Grahamstown. Yeah. So these parallel processes have been interesting, and I think I can you know, speak about, you know, what it's like to not be in the same room with artists, with, you know, with dancers. It's an interesting death in a way. I would say it's a kind of dying. And returns us to a place where the head, the word, takes precedence over the body. We've had to think of really beautiful ways to articulate a phrase, so that the dancers can, you know, get some kind of imagery that helps them kind of move through certain gestures. And this language is equally complicated because the dancers are Italian. English is my colonial language, and the physical language of dance is also a language. And my particular language, Naga, is a very animist. It's using the body with a non-European gaze, with a very African gaze, a very animist gaze. So, for instance, we have, you know, our fundamental position, of which we call Africa #1. You know, the first position. And you know, it may sound really simple because dancers know, you know, the ballet first position and all kind of modern dance, the American modern dance positions. But to really achieve this Africa #1, many things need to be happening at the same time. So the look of the shape, the form of the body in addition to what is happening spiritually, what you're conjuring ancestrally, you know, to try and communicate all these desires to achieve one position via Zoom. It's taken a while. It's taken a while, and because the dancers who are embodying this work that I'm making on them have a lot of training, European training, and so to kind of introduce another language into this body, you know, without being able to touch. I would say this is the most difficult, the most challenging thing, to convey a gesture without the touch and without the physical proximity and without my body being there so you can see what I'm doing. You can hear me breathe. You know, if you walk around a living body, you know, I believe completely that living bodies will work like plants, you know, with the sun, with photosynthesis, you know, that, you know, if another body is next to mine, you will get a sense of what I'm feeling, and I will get a sense of what you're feeling because of the proximity. And this is one thing that as we practice dance, how we learn, through proximity, and because language comes with so much baggage, and also second languages that we are always in translation, right? So we may be missing something, that we're always working with some kind of misinterpretation of our language. In normal times, this could be an interesting misunderstanding, but in this particular time where we are so dependent on language, it's not the most glorious thing. So the dancers in Bassano, they're embodying what I'm calling virtual studies for a Dark Swan. It's a work that I made for myself in 2005 as a reaction to another kind of African crisis, Darfur in Sudan, the genocide, which seemed to affect mostly women and the elderly and children. So I was watching a lot of the exodus of women, and they are most gorgeous women, you know, in their beautiful colors, with things on their heads, babies on their back, kind of just walk for miles to trying to get away from the violence. And I, you know, in this image, I could also, you know, empathize and see myself and see my mother, see my grandmothers. So I was very interested in the dilemma of women, and particularly African women, in all historical epochs, including now in Corona era. What is happening to the Black African woman, you know, this work, like Roberto Casarotto thought it would be a good work to share because of this particular attention to the female, and in also collapsing that with you know, Black Springs everywhere, Black Lives Matters. It seemed to be the best choice to bring now. It's also my my subversion of the dying swan. You know, I just took this 3-minute dance of this fabulous Pavlova dancing herself to death. And imagining that the women in Darfur, that the African women everywhere, and women everywhere are not going so easily to their death. They are not volunteering themselves to die. They are refusing, and they are doing everything possible to refuse the death. And I think this is what is connecting with the dancers in Italy at the moment, that coming out of the corona, as Italy, you are all coming out of it, and, you know, returning to some semblance of normalcy. And, you know, the work to refuse to refuse this annihilation by this virus, to refuse this new state impositions of how we should comport ourselves in relationship to one another, when we can go to the store, curfews, etc., you know, this kind of thing. So we've been working on virtual studies, and I called it virtual studies because of the virtual medium that we're using, and studies because, you know, we could not in all earnestness do the dance because we have to study the how. We have to study the how of the medium, of the virtual medium. You know, like we discovered that if you're just flat on, you know, everything looks off. And if you use the diagonal, the forever important diagonal line, that, you know, we can kind of see the dimensions better. And then times by 6 people in a room, how many cameras could we actually use to be able to get everybody in view, so that you're not just talking to the one person who's in your focus, you're talking to the entire room. You know, how much foreground, background, you know, depth of space we need to be able to see feet. So this is a study for us, because we're not masters of IT. We're not IT techs, you know. So we're all learning. We're primarily people who use the body as the instrument, and prefer to use it in proximity with one another, not through a translation of a camera, and a Zoom camera, for that matter, which is not the best quality. You know, so that's why it's called virtual studies. I thought also that would give us the freedom to explore, to be researching, to remove the perfectionist ego that all performers have, that, you know, we will die if we're not perfect. But we're okay when we think we are learning. Yeah.
I would ask you, because you
Yes.
mentioned a lot the word death, and how have you arrived to the dying swan of Anna Pavlov? Because very few people knows that version. When it was for the first time it was done, it was for charity, and the money raised were for orphans and widows. There is this passage for Fokin, who was, everybody were against him because he used too much barefoot, so he created something made on toe shoes. And it's incredible how many parallels there are, and also the theme, the thematic, which is this refusing to die. There is the attempting to escape death or to surrender to death. So how have you come from there to your work?
That's a really beautiful question. I appreciate it very much, because I have a passion for the Russians. I really do. I have a passion for the Russians, what they have given us in terms of the technique, the archive, the language of dance. Whether it's Fokin, who was constantly going against the grain always, or it's the infamous ballet russe when they all got together under Diaghilev, or it's the magical Stravinsky with his Rite of Spring. You know, I have a real passion for the Russians, because at this time in the early 1900s, Europe considers Russia almost in the same way it considers Africa. They're outsiders, they're not Europeans, they're barbarians. So their conquest, for example, of Paris is considered in the same way as the human zoos that, you know, where all this exotica was coming from the new lands that were being so-called discovered, and people were being paraded so Europeans could see other species of animals. The Russians were in the same bracket. So the Russians, I say the Russians, 1907, I think that's the year. Oh, is it 1905? It's 1905. 1905. So, you know, there is just the beginning of the peasant uprisings, which will culminate in 1917 with the Soviets, you know, with the rise of the Soviets, etc. So they, you know, Russia is politically unstable. And for Fokin to do this charity event outside with Pavlova dancing, and he created it like that. He didn't take too long to like think about, okay, what's going to be the choreography, etc., etc. He just put it together really quickly. Of course, he's a master, you know, Fokin is a master. Pavlova is also a master, you know, so the two of them was not to like. So then it's a dance really that for me touches me in that it's mostly about two things. It's about feet and arms. So, you know, for me, coming from a non-ballet tradition, I can be kind of maybe brutal in the way or raw in the way I see ballet. I don't have to, you know, I'm not seduced so much by the technique and its, you know, imperial history, etc., etc. I just see a woman on point, flailing about with the feet and the arms going, and finally she dies. Yeah, you know, so I thought, yeah, well, I also love the history of dance. There are many people who've written about the way woman is fetishized, also made like an adolescent. You know, that the point foot is like a phallic kind of a thing. This ice that she's dancing on, supposedly dancing on, it's all a fairy tale. Like, it's not a realistic person, you know. I mean, whether it's the swan or it's the other nymphs in Les Cephides, or Giselle, Swan Lake, it goes on and on and on and on and on, that there is kind of this othering of the women, even in this European canon, which helps me speak to your question, Anna, about the dilemma of the African woman. That the African woman is the lowest, as far as I'm concerned, in the totem pole, maybe even lower than children, you know, in the African spectrum, but also I think globally. In the African culture, it's so machismo, it's so patriarchal. Woman is property. Woman is property. Woman is belongs to father, belongs to husband. And if you cannot be oriented within those institutions, you're pretty much an outsider, which, you know, this kind of attitude continues even to today. So women have very few options, but to, you know, tether themselves to these male spaces for survival. And they have to keep producing because their value has to do with their productivity of children, with it, if they can produce children. Just like, you know, the land has value only if it can produce for you. Cows have value only if they are doing something of value to you. Otherwise, you have to get rid of them. You know, and my own mother was no different from this. She had children when she was very young, and I think this was also maybe a way for her to maybe exit an oppressive sort of maybe family space. But what do you know? You enter into another, you know, kind of space. So this is a dilemma that I'm talking about for women, that even with the arrival of colonialism, the dilemma for the African woman is always having to answer to something. And I was about to say that the arrival of the empire and the colonial systems and its kind of thrust of education as the way out, like that also created another dilemma for the African woman, that initially it was only boys who were kind of pushed into education. But even in more contemporary times where women are allowed to have education, the system in which we exist hasn't necessarily changed. You know, so, and then you also think about, for myself, coming from outside the art world, and kind of making a very insistent entrance into the space of, you know, creative imagination. I think they're always having to fight all these assumptions that you don't know enough, or you don't, you know, the dance, if you don't have ballet training, you are probably not really a dancer. You know, I mean, of course, there's a lot of movement away from that, but I'm just saying that there's a dilemma that you see a lot of the, so I wanted to kind of address this dilemma of myself in the art world as well, via the Dying Swan, by really subverting it, and allowing, I guess, the world to see it with different eyes, and perhaps repossess it differently. Yeah.
Okay, can we come back to the language, to the problems of the language and the translation? Yeah. Because in our language, in Italian, we usually say that dance is the daughter of a lesser god. So if we translate it, God is a male, dance is a female. So what does it have any sense? How can we talk about gender related to dance?
That's another beautiful question. I think Balanchine said also the same thing, that dance is female. But of course, he was the god. He was, you know, so all these things of the male choreographers, you know, the Western dance, let's say the Western dance, because if we say dance universally, I don't think we are being honest about what we're talking about. We're talking about an art dance. We're talking about a professionalism. We're talking about something that circles, and there's some kind of exchange, money for products, and this kind of thing. Gender, you know, it's interesting that gender keeps coming back, where a lot of people are questioning gender. You know, what is gender? Is it even relevant? Is it something else that capital has invented? to make our lives, you know, to kind of add purchase value to something. That if you're female, you have some value. If you're male, you have some value. If you're queer, you have some value. You know, like these are just categories that I think have something to do with the capitalist system. I try not to get too entangled in the question of gender and race, even though I feel I cannot escape both race and gender. I am Black, I am woman. These are inescapable, you know. But I think they're also traps to limit the capacity of the imagination if you just get stuck there. I think if you follow your history of dance in the West, it's the provenance of women. It's created by women. The women, though, do give birth to their sons who take over. Outside of ballet, I mean, ballet was always a male thing, male choreographers with the females just, you know, for decoration. And there still needs to be a great ballet choreographer. I mean, away from Crystal Pike and all this, like it really still needs to be a great female ballet choreographer. But where I'm most invested in is, you know, the modern dance, the contemporary and experimental, the live art space. This space, I think, brought about more democratization of this question of gender equity. I think there are more women in these spaces. There are more women who are allowed to experiment and to take a chance in these spaces. I think there are many great grandchildren of Martha Graham's and, you know, the German lady with her rich dance. You know, I don't know if I'm answering the question. I feel like I'm circling around it. You know, I don't know if gender remains something that we must really, I think it's something that we should maybe refuse to deal with, as we should also refuse these categories of race, because I think they are marketing ploys. You know, festivals say, oh my God, we don't have diversity, so let's just have this one Black person. You don't know if that one Black person, oh, let's have this one woman. What good does that do if we're not addressing the root problems, which start, you know, in the education of artists? You know, so to just have one choreographer who is being instrumentalized as a Black person, and then they end up having to, you know, kind of be like ventriloquists, like speak in tongues to try and cover all kinds of subjects that they may not even know, you know, or care about, because they are being used as the example. But look, we are diverse. We have Black persons. Oh, look, we are so interested in equity. We have women. And the truth is also there are so many women in other positions in the art world, you know, either as curators or as directors of spaces, as grant writers, as managers. You know, I feel like there's a lot of women in the non-performative aspect of our industry.
Let's talk about the future. What's
Okay.
the future of dance, according to you, the future of dance in general and of your dance? I mean, have you a dream that one day
Well, I used to be so annoyed with a little bit of what Rita was suggesting at the whiteness of dance, that I would just always be saying, but white dance is dead. And that its future really depended on Black and brown people being allowed into this art space. And it is true that in the past 20, 30 years, you know, let's say after Bhutto, because that was one wave of like trying to energize dance, that you see that there was a lot of African artists, you know, contemporary African dance really also kind of pushed the space. I think the future of dance needs for us to remember why we do this thing. For me, it meant I needed to go back to who I was, to my country, to my people, and really immerse in that language of the Shona, of who I am, and what they consider to be dance. So I think the future hopefully has something to do with our ability to negotiate the art market, the market of dance, maybe the destruction of festivals, so that we're not, you know, hopping around, you know, like we're like, I feel like I'm a Mexican, you know, seasonal worker coming to pick fruit when it's, you know, and then going away when it's not. So that, you know, the festival kind of platform creates a dilemma, really, of hopping around festivals, and maybe the future has to do with us being allowed to have more time to create, and that even the creative process is considered a product. The thinking, most of us spend more time thinking and working out issues like scientists. And this is work that perhaps we could also think of ways of sharing the process. And not just in the way people talk about, oh, we're just doing research, because I think research has become a dirty word too. It's like, yeah, you know, it's a language, it's a word for writing grants. It's research based, but then it's like, where is the research? We need to be able to see these processes. We need to be able to maybe be embedded in spaces for a long time. For instance, an example of a future which is already happening is my relationship with Bassano del Grappa. I've been going there, I think, since 2008. I think this is not about my gender. This is not about my race. This is about an institution, an organization that wants to be in a dialogue with artists over a lifespan. So perhaps the future feels like the old Renaissance, you know, where Caravaggio or Da Vinci would be, you know, supported by the Medici. You know, this old system of patronage, you know, because in some ways, some countries don't have the ability, don't have state funding. New York, and half the time I spend in Zimbabwe, there is no idea of how artists could be supported in Zimbabwe. In the US, it's mostly a philanthropic organization. It's not states, there's no state support. There's organization like Rockefellers, Ford, whatever, that support artists, but you have to compete for these grants. So what happens if you don't have the mastery of the language, or if you just don't know how to compete well, which is also a science, how to compete well. It may have nothing to do with your ability to actually create. So I think the future may have to do with us all kind of really looking at these things. Maybe it means returning to old-fashioned patronage. Maybe for me, in terms of my own physical well-beingness, it has meant returning home to learn the language of my people. I think the health of my body has depended so much on this, of moving away from techniques or styles that were like the English language imposed on me. You know, so I'm now working from inside out, so owning something that is mine. I think that this has allowed for a freedom of brains to open out, and the body to work in a health, and also maybe to bring into different spaces what animism, what animist technologies could be, and what contributions we could make from thinking of the world as a holistic thing, not something that you need to conquer, with something that you are a part of. I don't know if that, you know, and that's also the future is it's an important, but I don't want to lie. I don't know if I have all the answers. I feel like I just deal with it with how I'm understanding it, you know, in my very small way.
Thank you.
Thank you.